While the word unofficial should be underlined, circled, and highlighted, the Seahawks released their first depth chart of the 2023 season. Nick Lee and I are going to be taking a close look at the depth chart on both offense and defense and dissecting it here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined for our Tuesday episode by my co-host, Nick Lee, who is hosting from Wales here for this show. So I believe you said it's 6 p.m. there. It's 11 a.m. in my neck of the woods, 10 a.m. for our Pacific Standard Time listeners. So we're all over the place time zone-wise for this live show. Special thanks to all the 12s out there, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week, whether you're listening from Hillsboro, Oregon, or way over in Somalia. We've been really impressed with where all of our listeners are tuning in from. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks drawing closer to their preseason opener coming up on Thursday night at Lumen Field against the Vikings. We'll be diving into some key storylines to watch on the offensive side of the football for the Seahawks. And we'll have our first Fast Five of the year. No, it's not a sequel to the movie series. We're going to be looking at 5 players that have the most to gain for the Seahawks in the upcoming preseason opener against Minnesota. Without further ado, let's get to this jam-packed episode. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Since we've got a preseason game on tap on Thursday, Nick, the Seahawks dishing out their first unofficial depth chart for the 2023 season. And normally when these come out, there's a few surprises, at least fancy surprises. And it's worth noting that these come from the PR department. There have been plenty of times where players have been third or fourth in the depth chart, and then they end up being the backup and they make the football team. Or you have times where guys are backups and they become starters. So again, take these with a massive grain of salt, as big of a grain of salt as you can. That being said, this one feels pretty chalk to me, at least being at most of the training camp practices and being able to watch this football team. The starters, for the most part, we know who they're going to be. They're not going to be playing in these games, but we know who the starters are going to be, particularly on the offensive side of the football. It feels like there's very few surprises, especially on offense with all the returning talent the Seahawks are bringing back.
Yeah, first of all, hello, Cymru. Hello from Wales, as they say here. They speak Welsh. They are very proud of it. And I guess it's a bit more purple over in Wales. My camera, this old laptop I'm using, looks like I ate something in the Willy Wonka factory I probably shouldn't have or something. Anyway, so as far as the depth chart here, it looks about the same from across the pond, as they say. It's over here in Wales. It's pretty chalk. Nothing like, fall off my chair, surprising. Something that immediately caught my eye, though, is at the receiver position. We have, the guys. First of all, you have Diaz, who we know is going to be suspended, but then you have Matt Landers and Jake Bobo kind of emerging. Jake Bobo, I think, more so. Matt Landers, I think, might have lost some steam there. But both of those guys, both of those undrafted receiving options are emerging a bit, in the background. And Cade Johnson, who's been kind of an August hero, a preseason regular here in Seattle for a few years, has seemed to kind of slip behind. Again, take this with a grain of salt. But I think we might know a lot more about at least where these guys stand in the depth chart and, what the opinion is of some of these receivers with Cade Johnson being back there. Again, grain of salt with the first preseason game. But, who gets how many targets, who's in first off with, I don't know about the starters, but, early on, who's getting what target in what situation, I think will be telling. So the receiving depth chart, while it's not initially, super shocking, there's some interesting, background storylines to watch.
Yeah, and I think there might be some storylines developing with the backup offensive linemen because you got a few players like Jalen McKenzie who have had pretty good training camps for the Seahawks. And then you have a rookie like Anthony Bradford who has been really quiet and there hasn't been a competition at guard. So I do think that there's a little bit of intrigue when you're looking at the backups and the pecking order in a number of these positions. But on offense, this really is chalk, as I said, because Ken Walker III is going to be ready for week 1. He's running around, but they're not going to rush him back from a groin injury right now this early in the game. He's going to be ready to go for week 1. You know Gino's your quarterback. You know DK and Tyler. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, is going to get some preseason reps because he's a rookie, but he's going to play a ton of snaps on this offense. And then your tight end group, you got your 3 main guys coming back, and Tyler Mabry has played some for you. So there's just not a lot of mystery on the offensive side of the football. Now on defense, some fans have been baffled by a few things that, quite frankly, for me, being somebody that's been at most of training camp, again, it feels pretty chalk. But there are a few things on defense that jump out that are interesting, including the fact that Boye Mafe is listed as the starter across from Uchenna Nwosu, and Darrell Taylor's behind him. Now, some may say that's because Darrell Taylor's dealing with a shoulder strain. My personal opinion is, even if Darrell Taylor's healthy, that this is the way this is going to look, because Boye Mafe has been fantastic. Pete Carroll called him the most improved player on the roster this training camp. So this feels like it's not a surprise to me at all. Vi Jones being below Ben Burr-Kirven kind of surprises me, especially because Vi Jones has played some with the ones when Devin Bush didn't practice. But again, there's not a lot of real surprises for me at any of these position groups based on what I've seen in practice. I've seen the veterans like Mario Edwards, Draymond Jones, Jaren Reed. Those are the guys that are getting the bulk of the snaps on the defensive line. This is another one, Nick, that really feels like, for the most part, we know what to expect. And some changes could happen in the preseason, especially with some of these young players that are second string guys. But it feels like on both sides of the ball, there's not a lot of mystery and not a lot of surprises this year.
Yeah, I mean, you can read a little bit into the Boye Mafe thing for sure. And when the Seahawks drafted him out of Minnesota last year, the understanding was he was a bit raw. And, that takes a little bit. There takes a little bit when something is raw, takes a little baking in the oven, takes a little rising in the yeast,
Yep.
and things like that. And maybe he just needed that year to kind of rise and be refrigerated or something. I don't know, baked in the oven, something like that. Either way, it sounds like he's become fully baked and fully ready to go, or not fully baked, but he's more of that player, that polished, or become more polished than he was last year. Certainly not the fully polished product, but we all understood that it was a raw. He was a bit of a raw player. Now he might be emerging as the more talented of the two. We'll see. We saw him in Minnesota pretty raw. Then he had that kind of uneven, I would say, quiet rookie year, but still solid in the run game. And some of us kind of thought Darrell Taylor would run away with it last year. 9.5 sacks, 6.5 of those coming in the last 6 games. But yeah, dinged up a little bit. But yeah, like you kind of push back on, you see other guys on the depth chart that are dinged up that are still listed at their spots, like Ken Walker, Tariq Woolen, guys that are probably not ready to go, but they're still listed there. So I don't think that's necessarily what's going on with Darrell Taylor. I agree. Boye Mafe just might be rounding into form. I know some people immediately went to the cornerbacks, and then consequently safety with Kobe Bryant now. What's Devon Witherspoon doing? He's probably, I even did that too. Like, wait, where's the NCB? On the depth chart, because that is where Devon Witherspoon, I think, is right now. He's in. They keep saying he's in a battle with Kobe Bryant, but when you draft a guy 5th overall, he better be starting somewhere on the field week 1 if he's healthy. So, and I think he's going to. It's just a matter of the vision that fans have of what his role is supposed to be week 1 might be different than what the coaches have.
Yeah, and we've talked about this quite a bit on the show in recent weeks because Witherspoon's been playing so much in the nickel, but his physicality, his ability to blitz, his quickness, his stats last year in the slot were arguably better than on the boundary, and we know how elite he was as a boundary corner, unanimous All-American at Illinois. this kid can just do it all. And in this defense, in today's NFL, that nickel position has a lot of importance. So I know there's a lot of fans that are up in arms about that. Why is Witherspoon not listed as starter? He could still very easily beat out Mike Jackson and be your other outside corner in week 1. That is something that is still up for grabs, but he's going to be playing regardless. He's going to get a ton of snaps in that nickel position. They're going to move him around some. It's a different kind of weapon that they've had at the cornerback position. So fans, don't get, rest easy. Don't get too upset about an unofficial depth chart here, especially with the rookies. Some of these guys are going to climb up the depth chart. Mike Morris and Cameron Young are both on the second team. That means they are going to get a ton of reps in these games. So Seattle's coaching staff is going to get a really close look at all these players. No real surprises, but still some intrigue after the starters on offense and defense. Coming up next, we're going to be taking a quick peek at what to watch on offense coming up on Thursday's preseason opener against the Vikings. Might talk some quarterbacks, of course, some receivers, offensive line. Going to be a lot of fun digging into our first game of the 2023 season. We'll get to that here in a moment on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks, which is brought your way by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide players that are a guaranteed fit on your roster. With draft prep well underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Pick of the Week. If you're looking for a second-year fantasy football wide receiver who can drive your team to big points while he catches on with a new starting quarterback, then expect a smooth ride when investing in the Saints. Chris Olave. Olave was dangerous as a number one at every capacity as a rookie, and now there's no reason to pump the brakes now that he has an upgrade with Derek Carr throwing to him at the quarterback position. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forward, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating it out if your ride needs a little fixing up because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined for today's show live from Wales, my co-host, Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For our everyday tomorrow, we're going to be digging into what to watch on the defensive side of the football for the Seahawks in their preseason game and our picks to click on offense, defense, and special teams. Really our first pregame show of the 2023 season. Looking forward to it. Speaking of pregame festivities, we're going to be talking offense today, Nick, going into this first preseason game. Now, I know that some fans are going to say, well, it's a preseason game, the first one. We're mostly just going to be seeing third and fourth stringers against third and fourth stringers, maybe some fifth stringers thrown in there at the end of the game. And yes, that is what is going to happen, especially now with teams moving away from starters playing much, if at all, in these exhibition games. That being said, Nick, this is still going to be a game with a lot of players on both teams that are trying to make this football team.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, football's back. You're going to watch the Seahawks hit an opposite color, that we're going to watch them hit, the white and purple and yellow of the Vikings, which is always fun, especially after a long layoff. So y'all, I'm going to eat it up. I'm going to watch it, I'm going to be excited first few plays and then like, oh yeah, it's preseason. There it is. But either way, there's tons to go off of. My first, what to watch for, certainly, especially on offense, is the receivers. Like we kind of touched on it with the depth chart, especially with the suspension of D. Eskridge, who, the timing is unfortunate because he had that opportunity to kind of develop into that fourth receiver, and things aren't looking great for him with this franchise, and certainly in the depth chart now, who emerges. And it is nice though, that we're talking or debating, talking about who could possibly emerge as the fourth receiver for the Seahawks instead of the third, which I feel like the Seahawks it's been ages since the Seahawks have had a true, reliable third receiver. And so now when we're talking about who could be WR4 or 5, that's kind of like, you got to pick an aisle or a window seat still. But you're still sitting in first class. I mean, you're still it's Cadillac problems, but I do want to see who gets targets, how many, who emerges, who makes some splash plays. We'll talk about some names specifically later on, I'm sure. But guys like Matt Landers and Jake Bobo, like we've talked about already a little bit. Cade Johnson, who's been going down the depth chart a little bit, unfortunately as well. Cody Thompson, August frequent flyers. Who rises to the top and gets some of that opportunity, some camp bodies, so to speak? Do they make a splash? Do they make some noise as well? So there is an opportunity there, especially for the young guys to emerge, as certainly, the 3 spots are taken, top 3, Lockett, Metcalf, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. But who can take that 4th spot, especially in the absence of D. Eskridge? But even if he comes back, or if and when he comes back later in the year, can they establish themselves and say, you got to earn it back, because now I'm the guy at number 4 or 5. So I think that's one of the interesting things to watch, especially on the arm of a certain quarterback or two.
Yeah, I'm glad that you have that segue here, because when we talk preseason games, there's always that player that had previous starting experience, and sometimes it's not at a high-profile position like quarterback, but you just see these guys that are really fun to watch in the preseason. And for me, it's all about that Drew Lock gun show. Get me 2 tickets to the gun show. I want to see Drew Lock out there slinging the football all over the yard, because that's the way that he plays the game. And I was encouraged in the mock game last Friday. If you were there watching it, Drew Lock did not get much help. He was going against the starting defense. The defensive line was destroying the second-team offensive line. Draymond Jones, Boye Mafe, they were just dismantling that group. So Lock did not have a lot of time to throw. There was no run game to support him, and yet he completed over 80% of his passes. He didn't have any interceptions. He did lose a fumble. Boye Mafe says it was an accident. He wasn't actually trying to punch the ball out, but he did. And so that was the only turnover they had. But I thought Drew Lock, considering all those circumstances, did a really good job playing within the confines of the offense. He leaned heavily on Jake Bobo for a lot of the scrimmage, and those two seemed to build a rapport. And he was able to get the ball off to his tight ends a few times. So I was encouraged by what I saw, but I'm expecting against another team that the gunslinger is going to come back out a little bit. I'm going to take my shots downfield. I'm going to get the ball to guys like Matt Landers and Jake Bobo and Cade Johnson. I'm going to get the ball dumped off to my running backs. And he is going to play a lot in this game, because I'd be surprised if Geno Smith plays at all. If he does, just one series. But it's going to be the Drew Lock show. So I'm really excited to see what he does, because these are big games for him. He's still a young quarterback. If he can go out and have a really solid preseason for the Seahawks, who knows? Maybe there's a team next year that kicks the tires on him as a potential starter or waiting in the wing type guy. So there's still a lot riding on this. And I think he's going to come out aggressive, because that's the only way Drew Lock knows how to play the game. And it can be fun. It also can make you want to pull your hair out and look like me. So that roller coaster really presents a lot of fun in preseason games. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with those receivers that you mentioned as well.
And I think this is a bit of a redemption for him as well, because he never quite got the full chance last year in the preseason to totally display what he can do in a Seahawk uniform. And now we kind of know, Geno Smith was the guy pretty much all along, but he had those 2 touchdown passes in that last game he played with the unfortunate COVID case he had. Now we get to see Drew Lock perhaps as the first team all preseason kind of Drew Lock, picking apart the A, B, or the B, C, D, or E squads on defense. But it'll be good and fun to watch for sure. And as far as going to who might he hand off to, I think that's the question. Who will he hand off to at running back? No Ken Walker III, obviously. Zach Charbonnet, I think that they're going to be really cautious with him. I think for this preseason, I could be off base here, but you might want to treat him like he's your starting running back at this point. Get him warmed up. He was in pads earlier in this week, but he's kind of fresh off that injury. How much do you want to push him early on? But he is a rookie at the same time, so you want to get him some reps. But besides him, you got guys like DJ Dallas. should get touches. I'm excited. I'm really excited to see what Kenny McIntosh can do. I want to see that chip on his shoulder that it seems to come with from the draft. I want to see that displayed on the field.
And unfortunately, he's coming off that knee sprain, and it sounds like he dodged a bullet. They think he could be back pretty quickly, but he's not going to be playing in this game either. So, you get Drew Lock at quarterback. It's probably going to be, Bryant Koback, the pride of Toledo, who, by the way, is a phenomenal athlete if you've seen his testing numbers. So he might be a Troy Maine Pope type guy in the preseason. So Roderick Thompson Jr. out of Texas Tech. I've enjoyed watching him on the practice field too. So those are the names you're going to be seeing, I think, most of this preseason game probably, and not Zach Charbonnet and DJ Dallas.
No, not at all. And, Wayne Taulapapa is can you throw him in there as well? Maybe. I don't know about his health situation, but yeah, McIntosh, I'm hoping he gets back because he's a guy I'm really intrigued by. And there's a reason why the Seahawks felt the need to use a draft pick on him. But I think we also want to discuss, Corbin, kind of the guys in front, the offensive line. And I think you were really excited to see some of the battles there in the trenches.
Yeah, I want to see the buffet bashers, the rookie buffet bashers, get after it in the trenches. And this is going to be an important game for Oluwatimi because it does feel like the momentum right now is going towards Evan Brown. And the fact that Pete Carroll just out front came out and said, hey, Evan Brown's ahead right now. That doesn't mean that Oluwatimi can't win this job. He still could win it in these preseason games, but he's now playing from behind. He is in the trail position. And so he's going to get a ton of snaps. Evan Brown maybe gets a series or two. That'll be telling to me. If Evan Brown plays more than a series or two, then that tells you, hey, this competition is still very much open. If Evan Brown only plays like one series or none at all, and it's just Oluwatimi in there, then that tells you what you need to know where the coaching staff sits at that position. But Oluwatimi, this is a big game. And Anthony Bradford, I want to see something from number 70. I was really excited about him going into training camp, and he hasn't gotten very many opportunities. He hasn't played at all with the first team, but he should get a lot of reps in this game. I want to see what he's made of because he's been very quiet, and there's been a couple of guys like Jalen McKenzie that, quite frankly, have had better training camps to this point. So I want to see what happens when the pads come on in a game situation. Do we see Anthony Bradford emerge a little bit, or does he stay quiet? Because if he does, I think he's still making his football team, but things maybe start to become a little bit more precarious for a guy that's a day 3 pick. So I want to see what these two guys can do. I think Oluwatimi, from a starting standpoint, this is a big game for Bradford. You just need to get some momentum, some positive momentum for this kid that has had kind of a slow start to his first training camp for the Seahawks.
Yeah, you kind of painted a good picture there with Oluwatimi. Don't let the gap widen between him and Evan Brown at this point. I do want to have him have a good game and push Evan Brown. I still, there's no shame in losing out to a veteran in early in camp as a rookie. There's nothing wrong with that. But you definitely want him to push Brown, especially since Brown isn't that super proven, solid, center long term. You want him to be pushed still as well. And yeah, Bradford, you got to make your presence felt because he really hasn't in camp yet. So yeah, I'm going to be a center nerd this time around with this preseason. The game starts at 3 a.m. Friday morning here in Wales. So I'm going to be probably waking up with some toast and beans with my sausage and check it out Friday morning. Cause I'm going to be watching the center position real hard. Cause yeah, I think you made a good point too on how much does Evan Brown play? And that could be a huge indicator of where this is. I do want it close. I think the best situation right now is for Evan Brown to win out right now, but Oluwatimi push him and make it close. I think that's one of those iron sharpens iron kind of things.
Yeah, you want whoever wins this job to win it, not to have it given to them because the other guy didn't perform. And I don't think that's where things are at right now. Oluwatimi's had a good training camp. I just think Evan Brown has been really impressive, and the way that line played for the first unit with him in the lineup in the mock scrimmage, that built some momentum for Evan Brown. And you got to wonder where Geno Smith fits into this too. The quarterback has a say on this, so he may have a better rapport at this point with Evan Brown. There's a lot of factors to consider here, but this is a big preseason game for Oluwatimi. And that is a perfect segue here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by Nick Lee live from Wales for today's show. And a special thanks to all the 12s, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. as you just mentioned, the importance of this game for Oluwatimi. These preseason games, the backups, your rookies, this is their first taste of NFL action. Even if it isn't a regular season game, it is still a monumental occasion for those guys getting to play in front of the fans and play in their first NFL game, even if it doesn't truly count in the standings. And so you and I were talking about it before the show. It's time for our first Fast Five segment of this 2023 season. And we're going to be looking at players that have the most to gain. And when we get to the regular season, this segment will change up a little bit. But for now, the players that have the most to gain going into this preseason game. And I have a feeling I know who's going to be near the top of your list based on where our conversation has gone here so far on this episode.
Absolutely. Oluwatimi is up there for me. Again, I'm a center nerd. And also, he's wearing number 51 as a center. That's kind of what I did. Part of my high school football career, I was a center, number 51. So there's a little bit of nostalgia there for me. And of course, I've been pounding the table for the Seahawks to find a viable long-term center for, into my late 20s, now my early 30s. Here we still are looking for that. I want to see how much he plays, how well he does. Obviously, it's not going to be, you won't be able to buy all the stock and what happens a week or in this first preseason game against the Vikings, but him for sure. And then the guy he's going to snap to, Holton Ahlers. I am extremely intrigued by him. I'm not going to try to blow smoke and say he should be the backup quarterback right now, over Drew Lock. I'm not saying that, but he was uber productive in college. I mean, yes, he had a great system at ECU, the East Carolina Pirates, but absolutely tore up my BYU Cougars. And he was actually really fun to watch. I watched that game going, is this guy getting draft buzz? Like, who is this dude? And I kind of started following him ever since then. And I truly believe he could be, a viable guy in the background here as in the quarterback room, especially with that new rule this year. Holton Ahlers could have a golden opportunity here, especially moving forward, in the post 2023, where's Drew Lock, where's Geno Smith kind of future. And he's going to be a guy to watch. And so I want to see if that talented, left-handed athleticism kind of game he had in college translates to at least the preseason. That'll be fun to watch. So my first two are Ahlers and Oluwatimi there, the linchpins of the offense.
Yeah, the battery of the offense.
Battery, that's a good word.
I don't know that we'll see Oluwatimi and Ahlers together in this game because it's possible Joey Hunt will be in by that point. But you make a very good point with Oluwatimi, obviously the importance of this game. And Holton Ahlers, I think he's the only guy on my list that you have on your list. And I have him at number 3 on my list. But I want to talk first about the two guys that I have at the top. And they are two other undrafted rookies. You're probably going to notice a theme 12s on today's show, but it's the first preseason game. And undrafted guys, undrafted rookies, they have so much riding on these contests trying to win backup roster spots. And the Seahawks have had some guys that have made their roster spot with how they've played in these exhibition games. So for me, I got to start an offense. The man with the incredible locks. I'm jealous with the Chrome Dome, but I've been talking about it the last couple of days. Jake Bobo is the player that is really starting to make a statement to me from this undrafted rookie group because he just finds ways to get open. He's like a power forward at 6'4". I mean, I know in the NBA, a power forward is going to be like 6'7", 6'8", but in football terms, he is a power forward in the sense that you just got to get the ball in his area and he walls defenders off. He makes it really difficult for them to get their hands on the football. And he gets open. He has a great idea of what the defense is trying to do. Coverage-wise, he finds holes, and he's just sneaky athletic. He's not a guy that when you look at the testing, you're like, that was awful. But he does not run like a 4.99 guy. This guy runs like in the high 4.6, low 4.7s, which you can win in the NFL with that when you're 6'4", and you've got really good hands, and you have a great understanding of the game, which Jake Bobo has. And then on defense, Joey Blount, we mentioned the depth chart earlier. Joey Blount was carted off yesterday. We have not gotten an update on his situation with a back injury, but that is worth noting here because if Joey Blount has a significant injury, Jonathan Sutherland was getting some reps of the one since Jamal Adams is still out. Sutherland has a chance to be that box backup safety that can play special teams, a really good special teams player at Penn State. He has had a very up and down first training camp. I thought he started really slow. There were a few practices. He gave up a few big gains in the passing game in coverage, but he was starting to play better when the pads came out and made a few plays getting his hands on the football. So it feels like he's starting to get his feet underneath him. If he can go out and have a good preseason game on defense and Joey Blount's banged up, then he's got a chance potentially to play his way onto this roster, kind of similar to how Ryan Neal did several years ago. So those two players from the undrafted ranks, Bobo has been extremely productive, 7 catches, almost 80 yards the other day in the mock scrimmage, and had almost an 8th catch that would have been spectacular back of the end zone from Geno Smith. He's just continuing to find ways to stand out. So can he do it against other competition? I think it's a really big game for both those guys. And then Holton Ahlers would come in at number 3 on my list. Can you build momentum off the way he played in the mock scrimmage? Because honestly, I was excited about him going to camp, but he's been kind of disappointing for most of training camp, the reps he's had. But you saw the game that he's capable of playing in that mock scrimmage, had a throwing touchdown, ran the ball really well. So maybe he's going to get his feet underneath him and find a rhythm. And he could be a guy that ends up being a preseason star as well.
Yeah, certainly he's got, I mean, he's a quarterback, so he's going to be, all eyeballs are going to be on him. I'm going to go the opposite way with Jake Bobo and go Matt Landers. Not that Matt Landers has had nearly the camp that Jake Bobo has had, because he has not. But the floor is his. The floor is Matt Landers and of course, consequently, Jake Bobo's as well. The floor is theirs to make a splash, see what happens, especially with the absence of Dwayne Eskridge here with the suspension. They have a chance really to make a name for themselves. And even if one of them makes the team or one of them gets stashed in the practice squad, this is a chance for them to make an impression. Yep. And Matt Landers, we've been calling him kind of a one-trick pony this offseason. It's a really good trick if it works. So let's see that trick. Let's see that trick work in an actual game against the Vikings here on Thursday night for Friday morning for me. Let's see that in action, that size, that athleticism, that he can win the jump balls. I want to see that downfield from Matt Landers. And John Radigan's another one for me. Just can he emerge as that viable off-ball linebacker? He's been a solid special teamer, solid depth guy, but can he emerge to be more if asked? Because he might just be asked to do more than that this year. And if not, especially in the years to come, is he a future viable option as an every down, every week off-ball linebacker? And this could be a good start to that campaign. And then Tyreek Smith, coaches have been talking him up, the long bendy pass rusher. Can he stay healthy? First of all, make some sacks, make some noise, get on that radar. The coaches again have been talking him up. So another guy, I'm hoping he plays. I hope he suits up and does really well. So my last 3: Matt Landers, John Radigan, and Tyreek Smith.
Yeah, I'm looking at the end of my list. I mentioned Holton Ahlers comes at number 3, and I've got 2 veterans at numbers 4 and 5. So I'm taking a little bit of a pivot here from the undrafted rookies in the top 3 spots to proven players. I mean, Artie Burns has started a lot of games in the NFL, Nick, and he was a former first-round pick, and he was actually the starter, one of the starters at cornerback at the beginning of camp last year, and then he injured his groin, and that opened the door for Tariq Woolen to win that starting job, and we know that worked out pretty well for the Seahawks, but he was off to a strong start in camp last year, and then he goes out and has 3 pass breakups in the mock game against Geno Smith. One of them, he was able to get up, climb the ladder, and knock the ball out of DK Metcalf's hands on a jump ball, which is difficult to do. Punched it out. So Artie Burns has kind of made the statement, hey, don't forget about me in this deep cornerback group. And he's going to play a lot in this preseason game against the Vikings. If he can continue getting his hands on the football, make plays, I'm not saying he's going to make this football team, but he's got a chance to be one of those guys that ends up getting cut, that latches on somewhere and maybe starts eventually for another team because he has that kind of talent. That's the depth they have at this position. And then BBK, Ben Burke-Kirven at the linebacker spot. I was surprised to see him ahead of Vi Jones on the depth chart. That was one of the things that actually stood out to me. I was like, wait a second. But we know before the knee injury he suffered 2 years ago that really set him back, all of the obstacles he's had to overcome. That BBK was one of the best linebackers in college football at Washington. This guy racked up a ton of tackles, solid coverage linebacker. He's undersized, but he's got all the heart in the world, and that's why he's out there on the field again, overcoming the odds. And Pete Carroll's raved about the way he's looked these first handful of practices. They've had him on the field. They're gradually getting him more work, and he seems to be handling it well, which is great considering the injuries, the nerve issues that he had. So can BBK go out there and still make plays the way he did pre-injury in a preseason game? If he does that with the pedigree he brings to the table, he may very well be one of your backup linebackers, and maybe he can play his way back into being a potential player that plays on Sundays for you on defense down the line, because this was a very good college player at Washington. So he's one, just because of the story, I want to watch him. But I feel like he has a lot to gain if he's able to show that he's still got it out there and win one of those backup jobs. And we know he can play special teams too. So this is going to be a big game for him on a number of different levels. And I'm really excited to see what he's able to do in his return to game action for the Seahawks. As always, you can follow me on Twitter, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at NickLead51. I guess we could say follow us on X at this point, but I digress. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to ensure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, everydayers, we are going to be taking a look at what to watch on defense in the Seahawks preseason game and naming our picks to click on offense, defense, and special teams. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and thanks for listening. Go Hawks.